So last time we talked about expectations and how managing them are crucial for getting inflation under control. We talked about the fact that people have to form expectations about inflation in the future, and that those expectations have impact today. When we did this, we used a simple example of a pear farmer who needs to know how to price his pears into the future. But we were a bit unclear about why this matters to him. Let's think a bit more deeply about this with a simple example. Suppose, for example, that the pear farmer thinks that inflation at the end of the year is going to be 10%. If there was no inflation, he would charge $10 per kilogram for his pears, but since there will be inflation, he will charge 11. Suppose that he is wrong. Suppose that inflation is instead 20%. Why does this matter to him? Well, it matters because if general inflation is 20%, everything that he buys to run his farm is going to be 20% more expensive. So suppose that at the end of the year, he thinks a kilo of fish will be $11. So he projects that a kilo of pears will be exchangeable with a kilo of fish. If, at the end of the year, a kilo of fish is instead $12, he has lost 1/12 of a kilo of fish in real terms, or $1 in nominal terms. And this is the key difference between thinking in nominal terms versus thinking in real terms. When we think nominally, we think in terms of dollars, euros, or shekels. The word shekel just sounds funny to us. And no, we won't stop using it. We are almost always wrong, because currency is just a unit of account, as we learned in our money video. But it isn't really a stable unit of account if it keeps changing in value. What do we mean by changing in value? We mean the amount of goods and services it buys. So when we say I have 50 euros, we just mean I have 2 pairs of designer underwear, or 1 pair of reindeer antlers, looking at you, Finland. So thinking in real terms is better because it actually forces you to think in terms of actual value, instead of some contrived notion of value tethered in a social construct. But then the question arises, what does it mean to think in real terms? In terms of what? Buckets of wheat, fish, phlogiston. Who does that? Who says I have 1,000 buckets of wheat in my pocket? Nobody. In fact, it is hard for us to think in real terms because it is hard to think of a collection of things that make up most of our daily consumption. Consumption includes rent, food, energy, entertainment. And the occasional ice cream cake binge, so what to choose? Well, economists have found a solution to this by constructing a basic basket of goods they use to measure inflation. They call it the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. It takes a bunch of consumption goods that we spend our disposable income on, weighs them by the proportion of income we spend on each, and measures the price of this basket and its change. But then, again, who thinks in terms of a basket of goods? Large producers maybe because they have to. But we don't individually, because it's just ridiculous. When we think in nominal terms, we are wrong, but how wrong we are depends on how large inflation is. If inflation is 1%, we're not really that wrong. If it's 100%, we're dead wrong, by orders of magnitude. So when those Brazilian economists used that made-up currency that did not exist and just tracked inflation, they made it super easy for people to think in real terms without having to calculate the prices of a bucket of wheat. In fact, it is such a cool idea that we are surprised more countries haven't invented it. It may not be quite as useful in, say, Canada as it was in Brazil, but it is a very nice way of helping ordinary citizens realign their thinking in real terms. Thinking in nominal terms has real consequences. It tends to catch people off guard when inflation becomes significant. People change their minds slowly, kind of like that famous frog that realises too late that it's a boiled frog. If inflation today is 1%, then we're not that wrong. If tomorrow is 3%, we are wronger. But still okay. If this continues to increase bit by bit, each year we're wronger. We know that's not a word, but it's funny, so just let it go. Until one day, we wake up and a few years have gone by with those mistakes adding up. 5 years of this and the evil of compounding has worked its evilness into our wallet. If prices rise by 1% each year, in 5 years you'll have 1.01 to the power of 5, roughly 5% increase. If they rise by 4% each year, in 5 years you'll have 1.04 to the power of 5, nearly 22% increase in prices. So being wrong consistently for 5 years can get you in a lot of hot water. Frog found that out the hard way. And when we finally find out, we get all angry and stuff and we overcorrect by assuming next year's inflation is going to be way higher than it is, because we're emotional creatures. Nominal thinking is rooted in the fact that we're not machines, and taking a collection of prices into account can't really be done unless you sit and track your friendly CPI each month. People don't do that. They have other things to think about. I mean, the new season of Talent isn't going to watch itself. So we make these mistakes and rely on the smart people, so that these mistakes are not that costly to us. But the smart people, no matter how smart they are navigating an uncertain world, and they screw up sometimes. In other places, the smart people are replaced with government stooges who just say yes to any scheme that keeps them in their jobs. And then we get so used to inflation that even when new and smart people come into power, we don't believe them. What we think of future inflation often depends too much on past inflation, and it's hard to break us out of that habit. That's why economists in general are kind of afraid of large increases in inflation, because once we change our mind, we tend to overdo it. In conclusion, be wary of nominal thinking. Realise that it's a mistake, but that how big that mistake is depends a lot on the people in charge of the money. If those people are trying their best, they'll fail sometimes but won't fail forever. On the other hand, if the people in charge are high on print fumes, you better spend a lot of time with your local CPI dealer. He's got the answers. Remember, in the end, inflation hurts those people who can't defend against it more, especially the poor. Rich people can buy dollars or gold because they have money saved. Poor people can't. So whenever the central bank governor in your country says we're printing to help our people, he's not exactly being honest. Stay tuned, money enthusiasts.